Thank you, guys. Good morning, everybody. Fox News alert: Obamacare heading back to the Supreme Court yet again. At issue, a cornerstone of the law, and a decision against the administration could mean a fatal blow. Good morning, everybody. I'm Bill Hemmer. Welcome here to America's Newsroom, back here in New York.
Good morning
to you.
Bill. Good morning, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum. So the oral argument about to begin. Obamacare now once again at the feet of the Supreme Court. This is a live or die decision, and it could leave millions without insurance.
So Team Fox coverage leading off today, Stuart Varney, on the financial impact of a decision. But first, we go to Shannon Bream live on the steps of the Supreme Court. Shannon, what is at the heart of today's case?
Well, it's all about this phrase that says the subsidies, those tax credits that will help people to afford the health insurance policies that they purchase, that those only extend into states that have set up exchanges. Well, 37 states did not set up their own individual exchanges. 3 of them are working on that, so maybe we're left with 34. But still, the majority of states said we're not setting up our own exchanges. So the argument is that going to affect whether these subsidies get extended? The IRS said we extend them anyway. Here's what critics of that have to say. Here's Michael Cannon of Cato.
These subsidies and these taxes are only authorized, quote, through an exchange established by the state. And if we say that members of Congress didn't expect the law to work that way, well, we're just admitting that members of Congress didn't read the law before they passed it. They passed it hastily, and now they're having buyer's remorse. It turns out that supporters of Obamacare don't like Obamacare any more than the rest of the country does.
And don't forget, we had that sound come up from Jonathan Gruber, the so-called architect of Obamacare, in which he said states that don't set up exchanges, people there won't get tax credits. He's now saying, Bill, that's a mistake. That's what he said.
So the administration does not have a backup plan. That's what they say. Republicans, however, do in Congress. So what happens on the overall framework of Obamacare if the subsidies are struck down by the court?
We're talking roughly 7 to 8 million people who are now getting these subsidies. So critics of this legal maneuver say, listen, you've got to think about the real people who are going to be impacted here. But even those folks, those who support Obamacare, say they acknowledge it's going to be tough for the law to survive if these subsidies are struck down. Here's Elizabeth Wydra, Chief Counsel with the Constitutional Accountability Center.
It's extremely critical. The availability of tax credits to every American who needs them across the country is a crucial part of the Affordable Care Act. And without it, the act simply can't function. That's why it's so preposterous to think that Congress would have written the law in the way that the challengers say it did.
So we'll have to see whether the justices focus on just those few words, that standalone text, or whether they take it in the entire context of the law and assume that Congress meant for those subsidies to be extended. In the meantime, as you mentioned, Republicans say they have a backup plan they're confident in if those subsidies are struck down. We'll have a decision by late June. Bill.
Thank you, Shannon. Here we go again.
You got it.
Shannon Bream from the court. Martha has more.
Well, as we've been saying, this decision could affect a lot of people. An estimated 9 million get tax credits to help them pay for Obamacare. The subsidies are available for people with an income up to 400% of the federal poverty level. That's just under $100,000 for a family of 4. They are eligible for this money from the government to help them pay for their health care. So here's Fox Business correspondent Stuart Varney with more on this. So, Stuart, tell me a little bit about your take. It's very interesting to hear that one of the reasons that this clause might have been missed by so many people on the Hill is because they didn't read this bill. So now a small phrase about the states could mean that this thing gets overturned.
It has huge financial impact, whichever way the court decides. As you say, up to 9 million people in 34 states would lose their subsidies if the court overturns those subsidies. And the New York Times says those hardest hit would be whites who have a high school graduation certificate. That's the worst affected group. Secondly, if these subsidies are withdrawn, then a lot of people will withdraw from the health pool, the health pool risk. As they withdraw, the risk in that pool goes up, so the price goes up. In other words, if you've got an Obamacare health care insurance policy and these subsidies are withdrawn, whether you get the subsidies or not, your premiums are going to go up.
Yeah.
But thirdly, Martha, perhaps most important, 15% of the American economy is healthcare. You withdraw those subsidies, you throw that 15% of the economy into a great deal of confusion. And for the first time, as I understand it, the court would be withdrawing a benefit that is already being received by millions of people. It is a very big financial deal.
So if you live in a place where the federal government is your your exchange because your state didn't sign up, and then you lose your subsidy that helps you pay for it, and you say, you know what, then I can't afford it because I don't have that subsidy anymore. Are you going to get fined?
That's a very good question, and we don't know the answer to that question. If you don't have health insurance, you are subject to a fine imposed by the IRS. If those subsidy dollars was withdrawn, you can't afford coverage. What then? I simply cannot answer your question, Martha. It's more of the chaos and confusion which has surrounded Obamacare since its inception.
Amazing. Amazing. All right, Stuart, thank you very much.
We had Paul Ryan on yesterday when we were down in Washington. Yeah. He's got a plan to make sure the tax credits stay in place for people who need them, to give millions of Americans an off-ramp if the court goes against the administration. But you and I are going to have another day here in June.
Absolutely.
Somewhere late in the month, we're going to get this decision.
And everybody's going to be watching the Chief Justice, John Roberts, because a lot of people were surprised by his decision in the first live or die decision in the Supreme Court. Now he's got another try at bat. He once said that he acted as a referee at the Supreme Court. So we'll see how he perceives, how he reads this case. It's going to be fascinating.
Off we go.
Watch.
Back to Shannon Bream when we get the oral arguments a bit later today. In the meantime.